Alright, so when I bought this part slot a couple weeks ago, I said I was going to rebuild one of these gearboxes because it was leaking. You can see on the bottom of this all the crap and the grime that's on there. I don't think this seal might have been leaking, but that's a secondary issue. The bigger issue was this seal leaking because I don't think the shaft should be able to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this gearbox apart and see if we can rebuild it. If we can't, oh well, but I think it's at least worth the attempt to rebuild it. And so what we're going to do first is, I don't know, set the camera up a little bit different. We've got to take this plate off, which this is for the drive over. I think this is just to protect the front of the vent and everything for the drive over. And then we'll take, after we take these two bolts off, we'll take these two off, and we'll take this whole top plate off, and we'll see if we can get this thing apart. Keeping in mind that I have absolutely no manual to this, and I am now reminded that I probably should take all the fluid out first. That way we don't end up with an absolute mess. So let me get set up for that, and then we'll work on taking this apart. Should it be something simple, which I'm pretty sure it's not, I think these are the two seals right here. Deere actually had this one in stock, and this one, I haven't taken them out of the package to read the seal numbers yet, and this one had to be ordered. But I'll see if those are the two correct seals. Those are for the old MIA, or yeah, those are for the old AUC part or MIA part number, and this is an AUC gearbox. So, or those are, anyway, there's some part number differences in there. So I'm kind of taking a stab at this. So let me get set up. I'll go ahead and drain the gear oil out. All right, so got all the gear oil drained out of it. I'm gonna leave that open, or there wasn't very much in it. Interesting quandary here. So I've got a 1/2 inch socket and a 13mm socket, and these bolts appear to be 1/2 inch, and there's not much oh, these are cap bolts. Ah, yes. So this gearbox has been into before. These are 1/2 inch bolts up here. These are 1/2 inch heads. This is a 13mm head back here. So this gearbox has the incorrect hardware on it, telling me that somebody probably screwed up somewhere. I'm just going to use all 13mm to get this lid off. Make sure you can see this. So, as I said, that's incorrect hardware. So there's our plate. And then our back bolts. I've probably got some of these bolts floating around here. Now, I think if we take, yeah, we can just pry it up, see if there's a, yeah, there's a gasket in there. I thought there was a gasket in there. I didn't order it because I didn't want to well, I didn't order it for a couple of reasons. One, I went ahead and ordered the seals because I wanted to see if they were the correct part number. But I did not order the gasket, and I didn't order any bearings or anything like that. Now keep in mind that I have never done anything with these gearboxes, so I don't know exactly what I'm getting into. I'm going to go ahead and clean all this up. So there's the top of the shaft right there. So let me study this for a few minutes and we'll come back and we'll work on it. All right, I figured this out. This is actually a splined shaft right there, and I couldn't make it out because there was some rust on it and some gear oil, which you can still, hopefully you can still see popping up. So actually what I can do is I can just take, and I think I just had it moving. Go figure, once I turn the video camera back on, it's not moving anymore. Let's try these. Well, we'll just bust out the big guns in. So I thought. Yep, there we go. Okay, so there's our bearing, and that's why we can take it off. The gear is in the top. So the gear sits down in there on that splined shaft. Like that. That bearing feels okay. And then there's what appears to be a spacer in there. Huh. All right, so figure out how to get the center shaft out. You basically just have to drive it out from the bottom back through there. There is a bearing that you probably can't see, but it's in there, and it must be pressed in. So now we're left, and this is the shaft itself. Overall, I haven't cleaned it up yet, but overall it actually looks decent. And so this part that I already took off goes on the top. So I get it lined up. Goes on the top there, and this shaft spins, and that gear is held in place by those, the shaft is held in place by the splines on that gear in that bearing. So now I'm left trying to get this shaft out, which, based on the feel of it, it needs to come out of this hole right here. So to do that, I guess I need to figure out a way to get that cover out of the hole, which not exactly 100% sure how to do yet, at least not in that size. So I'm going to experiment with that a little bit. I may or may not get it on video, but I'm going to work on getting that plug out of the back of the gearbox right here. I don't know how tightly it's in there. I don't know if it's pressed in or what, but we should be able to get it out. I'm going to try to reuse it. For those of you that watch Squatch253 and his rebuilds of that Caterpillar D2 he's doing, which I find absolutely fascinating, he recently went through this on the hour meter or the service meter on the D2 that he's building. So I'll work on this, and I'll come back and I'll show you how I get it out, or how I got it out. Well, we complicated this a little bit. I was attempting to use a brass punch to just kind of loosen up the cover, and the gear fell through, and I can tell you there's all kinds of carnage in there. I mean, you can see the seal. All right, so what I've been able to do is I've just been able to kind of twist this over on its side now that I kind of hosed it, but that's okay. This does have a rubber seal on it, so that's something we're going to have to deal with in the future. Maybe it's just Permatex, I'm not really sure. I'll have to look in the parts diagram and see. And we'll take this gear out. Ooh, that's a tight fit. There we go. All right. So what we have is we have a very loose bearing. We have a threaded shaft. Not sure how the threaded shaft works. We have a bearing race and a washer, some type. So those were sitting on the shaft like this. Really got to figure out what those threads are for, because there's nothing in the gearbox itself that appears to be threaded. So let me get these seals out, and we'll see what's in there. This drive shaft, or this gearbox, may actually be just complete toast. All right, got the seals out, and I think this is how it was in there. problem is when I took the seal out, this kind of popped up. I think this is how it was in there, and this has threads on it. So I'm guessing that this went on here like so. And not sure what all the individual components to do quite yet, but the threads feel okay. I'm guessing just somebody didn't put this back together right. Of course, ruined a couple bearings in the process. So there's that. I think that went over there like that. And then here's another one of our bearings that actually appears to be okay. Yeah, actually appears to be okay. So there's that. And then here is a snap ring that I'm assuming holds this bearing in. Or my guess is it holds this bearing in. It's got some type of washer in there. Let me go get some snap ring pliers. Oops. If I ever figure out how to use a pair. It's another one of those fancy washers. Didn't seem like it would take a lot to get that out of there. And then this bearing appears to be fine. Yep. Okay. So in an effort to keep all of this some semblance of an order, that's going to go in there like that. Now we have a completely disassembled gearbox. Now I just have to go through it and figure out what needs to be replaced and what was wrong with the original assembly that made this move up and down. It doesn't appear like there's any major damage on these parts. At least it doesn't appear that way. But I'll get them all cleaned up, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss it some and figure out what we need to do. Alright, so I've got all these parts cleaned up, and I think I've figured out how this thing goes back together. The only problem is the parts diagram shows about a half dozen of these different sized washers, and I only have 3. Tells me that somebody's been in this gearbox before. So what I've done, let me tilt the camera up here a little bit. I've got the gearbox oriented to just show you how these shafts interact. So this is the top of the gearbox up here. You can see by the vent. So this shaft would be where the pulley goes for the deck. And this would be the drive shaft right here. This unit, well, we've already kind of explored this one. There's a bearing that sits in this journal right down here. This is just a plain ball bearing. It's in fine shape. This bearing is a splined bearing that sits on top of the shaft and interacts with this gear right here. The gears actually seem really good. In fact, I don't have any problem. I don't see any major issues with the gears. So I'm going to set that one off to the side for just a minute. I'm going to set all this off to the side as well. So this is how this piece works. There's two bearings in here. So you have your gear, and you have to put this shaft in first, or you have to put this bearing in first, because I've already attempted to reassemble it. There is a step in here that these two bearings, right here at the end of my finger, make sure you can see that right here in my finger. There's a step in there that these two bearings are sandwiched between, like so. And then what happened, I think what caused all of these issues is there's this retainer right here. That's the screw part. This retainer holds that bearing in place and basically holds the shaft stable. And this is a locking ring, although I don't know how it works. I've never seen one of these before. You have to keep in mind I only do lawn and garden stuff, and I do all this on the side, so I'm not that experienced with mechanics. I just like to fix my own stuff. So there's just one tab that is bent already. So I'd assume that that tab sits in one of these, but I don't know how it keeps it from not turning. That is a quandary to me, unless no, I don't think that's going to work. So it's got to be this way. The problem is all these were apart when it came out, and when I pulled that cover off, or when I pulled the seal out, these were all kinds of in a shambles. So I don't have a good record of how these would fit. But I think that's how it works, and it just holds this in there, and I'll show you how really quick. Take this back off here. Like that. So the shaft will sit in here like so. Well, it's going to be difficult to do on camera. Oh no, there it goes. This bearing sits in here like so. And this sits in there. So see, that's our start with and how it moved in and out. And if we tighten this down, which maybe I have to go look up YouTube videos on how these things are put together. And so I'm just going to tighten it at finger tight, and you see how much better that is. And I suppose this goes in there and just sits in there somehow and locks it in place. But I'm going to have to do some research on that. Your guess is as good as mine at this point. I don't know. And I have to figure out how these play into everything. I know there was one on top of this bearing. Oops. One on top of this bearing. And I think there was one on the bottom of this bearing, like that. I guess that prevents up and down play. And then one of these was somewhere in there, but I don't know where, it just kind of fell out. So I'm going to work on that. It'll probably be a couple days before I get back to this project. But that's at least the innards of a newer deck gearbox. This came off of a 54HC deck, and this would be a gearbox that would replace any of the older, the DE part numbers and the MIA part numbers. In fact, I think this gearbox is an MIA part number. So I'm going to work on this, and hopefully you learned something. I know I did, and thanks for watching. All right, quick addendum to the video. Figured out what happened. I was talking to a friend, and evidently there's a little keeper on this keeper that I wondered why there was a slot on the shaft right here, and evidently this broke off. And probably the reason that probably the reason that it looked halfway disassembled before is because somebody tried to fix that, and when they tried to fix it, it just basically hosed it. So And this does not have a part number, nor does this. So I have to figure out if there is a way I can find one of these keepers. Might be, oh, there's a blue mark on that. So I will work on that and see, because if I can find one of these keepers, then we can rebuild this gearbox. If I can't find one of these keepers, I've just got a bunch of parts here. So I figured I would clue you in on that one.